Hey everybody, Sean Bukowski here. Hope you're all having a great week. Wanted to talk a little bit about this week about some exciting news here in Austin. Last week was City Council declared this housing affordability week in Austin, and as I'm sure you're aware, housing affordability is a real problem. It's a problem nationwide, and it's certainly a problem here in Austin. And it's something that it's hard to complain. It hasn't been discussed much. I mean, at the city council level in the last 18 months, but in fairness, they've had COVID, a lot going on. So it's kind of been put on the back burner in the last 18 months. But now, last week, they met and tried to discuss some potential solutions. If you recall, back in I guess 19 and 20, the city council was working on a complete overhaul of the land development code, and we've written about this before. And what they were trying to do was encourage more housing, more dense building, especially along the travel corridors that people will travel on. And unfortunately, that got tied up in a lawsuit brought by some neighborhood groups, and then the neighborhood people won. And so right now, while their city council is appealing that lawsuit, it is tied up in court, and so the land development code overhaul is kind of on ice at the present moment. So they met last week to try to see if they can come up with some other solutions. Mayor Adler specifically wanted to talk about solutions that maybe they could find a consensus on, which potentially leaves out some of the more possible greater solutions that while from maybe more controversial, might have a greater impact on housing affordability. So what did they talk about? Some of the things they talked about was more housing in commercial areas. While I think this is a good idea, there seemed to be a lot of consensus on the city council for this. People, at least in theory, seem to agree. Now, of course, when we get to actually what's going to happen, we'll see how much consensus there is. But from an outside perspective, there seemed to be agreement among the city council that this would be a good one good way to potentially combat housing affordability issues. They also talked about accessory dwelling units, ADUs. They talked two different things they talked about. One, having some of them being allowed to be converted into full houses on a single lot like that, and two, there's some single-family homes in town that aren't allowed to build ADUs, and changing the code to allow them to build all single-family houses to build an ADU, and there was some pushback on that by at least one council member. Of course, as is always the case. They also talked about compatibility in many areas of Austin. Regardless of what zoning says you can build, you are limited by the surrounding areas. So if you're a commercial developer trying to build next to a residence, you may be limited by two-story houses all around you. So there was talk about that, but that got a lot of pushback from some of the more neighborhood-focused council members. And finally, this one kind of made me chuckle because a few months ago, I think, I wrote about could we see the return of the corporate town, the company town, and the Austin City Council said, yes, let's do it. They talked about providing incentives for companies to build housing for their employees. So, none of these proposals these weren't proposals that would actually be passed. They were sent along to City Manager Spencer Cronk for him to investigate more. There was not talk about looking back at the land development code, and as we talked about, that's still tied up in the courts, but they haven't addressed, what happens if we lose, what are some contingency plans, that kind of thing. The bottom line is we need more density in the city. We have a serious affordability problem, and we need more density in the city, and hopefully our city council will be able to figure those things out. Hope you enjoyed it. If you like it, please subscribe to our YouTube page and subscribe to our blog. Thanks a lot. Have a great week.